Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Jorge's Isolation Podcast. This is episode number 9. Number 9. Can you all believe it? I've made it up to this point. So that's a good thing. And thank you for everybody who's been able to see this and watch this and share this on YouTube and on Buzzsprout through my iTunes and Spotify and Google and Stitcher. Thank you. Please continue to spread the word. I'm having a lot of fun, and I think a lot of these conversations are very insightful. I'm speaking to different artists, and I'm speaking to a special artist today. I'm talking to Ashley De La Rosa. In this conversation, we got to talk about a lot of things. Ashley, right before the shutdown, of course, all of my guests that I've been speaking to have been affected by the shutdown because we're all artists in this industry. She was on the tour, the Peggy tour of Hamilton, and she was in San Francisco right before the shutdown. So we got to talk about that and the moments leading up to the shutdown and, the meeting where they heard about the show being, stopped or postponed or delayed and the expectation or, just just the uncertainty of the events of COVID-19. And then, we got to talking about the other issues affecting America right now and how that's affected her and how it could potentially affect the nation. And, that's what I love about this, podcast is that we get to talk about things. They're not just the craft of acting or TV or film or, shop talk, there's real life outside of, the stage, the rehearsal space, the black box, the TV set, the film set. And, that's what we got into in this conversation. It was a beautiful conversation. And, so Ashley De La Rosa, she was in Hamilton. She was in Mean Girls on Broadway, beautiful on Broadway. She's super talented. And go ahead, sit back and relax. Man, I'm already excited about this, and I'm excited for you to listen to this. So, all right, here we go. This is Jorge's Isolation Podcast, and I am talking with Ashley De La Rosa. All right, Ashley, here we are.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm doing well. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I mean, considering everything that's been going on for the last, how many months now? It's been March, so it's April, May, June, July, August, almost 6 months.
Yeah, 6 months.
Yikes.
Yeah.
And where are you at right now?
Now I'm back in Florida. So in March when I lost my job, I flew out to my parents' place in Florida. Mm-hmm. And I was here for like 2 months. And then, cause I'd rented out my room and everything. Yeah. And then my sublet ended up like leaving. So I was like, okay, well now I have my place. Yeah. So I drove back up to New York. I was there for probably like another 2 months and then just drove back down after the March on Washington. I just continued the drive down.
Perfect.
And I'm here for a little bit until I vote. And then, cause I just didn't trust it. I was like, they might not send it to me in New York. So I'm going to vote here.
That's what we're worried about too. Yeah. The mail-in stuff and then just getting our licenses. We can't even update our license stuff because, it's because of COVID, everything was shut down. So you have to do appointments. Yeah. And the nearest appointment is October 26th. Mm-hmm. So we got to wait till then. So we're cutting it really close, but it's politically speaking, it's one of the weirdest times in history.
Yeah,
the
for sure.
Weirdest time, I think. I mean, since I've been alive, and it's going to be a circus during these debates. Like just. Yeah. I don't know what's going to happen. I just pray for our country.
Forward to it.
No. And it just feels like it's just so uncertain. Like everything, I mean, just everything's uncertain all around, politically, artistically, like.
Yeah, definitely.
Have you been getting the I'm an artist, working artist, the hashtag that's been going around? Have you seen that?
I literally just heard of it yesterday.
Okay, me
My
too.
aunt like tagged me in something, and today I signed a petition, like the
Yeah.
one for the senators.
Mm-hmm.
So I signed that, but I did not know that this was happening. And I'm like on the, there's like the Facebook page. I'm sure there are multiple Facebook
Oh
pages,
yeah.
but
Yeah, yeah.
for unemployed artists, and it's just kind
Yeah.
of like we share information.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard, like, I haven't heard talking about this specific initiative. I went on the
Mm-hmm.
website today. It's like a full grassroots thing,
Yeah.
organization, and they've got like facts and figures. And I was like, okay, no one posted this in the Facebook page.
No,
Um,
and I was
yeah,
surprised that it's not getting as much attention as it should be, because
yeah,
like there's a lot of people on both sides of the aisle that just think that, oh, you're just an artist, you're an actor, quit
mm-hmm.
being a baby, like you just want to be famous. And it's just like, really, what were you doing during the shutdown?
Yeah,
Were you not
yeah,
watching TV? Were you not listening to music?
mm-hmm.
What were you doing? Reading a book? Like, all
Yeah,
people contribute to this,
yeah,
and it's
yeah,
tough. And all of a sudden we're not working. So then what's going to happen?
mm-hmm.
Are you going to complain when there's no TV shows? There's nothing but reruns. It's like,
Yeah.
that's why we need to work.
And
That's
I think, yeah, I think like with people, and there's always been that longstanding, um, I don't know, just this idea that artists and athletes, that it's, and I've seen it, if I follow some like famous people on Instagram or something, and they'll, whenever they post something like, for example, Rachel Brosnahan from Maisel,
yeah, yeah.
she posted a while ago, like not even it wasn't even quarantine related. It was like maybe a year ago. And she posted something about, I think it was about like women's rights or something. And I like was scrolling through the comments, and just some random guy was like, stick to what you do best, acting. Like,
Yeah.
no one pays you to have an opinion. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, Gary at like Office Max, also no one pays you to have an opinion either. Like, why does
Exactly.
your job and my job, like, why am I not allowed to speak out? So like when the NBA went on strike basically, and like did what they did, it was, finally people were like, oh, I see these men as like, and when the WNBA did too, but like I see these people as human beings and not just as like commodity. Like what we do is commodified, but we are not commodities.
No.
And it's just like, now people are finally waking up to it, that like this affects us in so many ways.
Absolutely. No, it truly does. And people, I don't know what people's deals are with that. It's kind of like, I know a lot of people were mad at the NBA players. Just like, their first argument is like, well, why didn't they surrender their millions of dollars? I'm like, I don't know. Maybe they that's their job. Like, I wouldn't surrender would you surrender your millions of dollars? Like, you're not going to. So it's just like, get over it. They're standing up for something. I mean, what's surrendering their money or taking the money? How is that going to change anything? They've been trying to be heard for how long?
Exactly. Yeah.
So without the money, it's like,
yeah. And a lot of the players, like, or quite a few of the players, at least that I follow, like they've made their own donations to whether it's Black Lives Matter or for, so it's what the individual person does with their own funds is up to them. It's like, you can say the same thing about Jeff Bezos. Like he just bought the most expensive mansion. I don't know. I just heard about it yesterday. He bought the most expensive mansion in Los Angeles like 2 days ago. So it's like you can, and his worker, and like you have Amazon workers, factory workers, and my cousin's a factory worker for Amazon, and she's considered essential. And she's also high risk as well, and has 2 young kids at home. So for a while she had to, like, when it was really bad in Florida, she had to get a note from her doctor, because she was like, I literally I can't work. Like, I'm a single mom. If I'm gone, like that's it. Like I need to be with my kids, and I can't get sick. She just started going back to work a few weeks ago, but it's like, here's Jeff Bezos, like here's the NBA, you know what I mean? At least like one of those groups of people is actually using their like status for good.
Yeah, and their visibility as well. You know, like LeBron James, like a lot of people were mad at LeBron James, and well, what has LeBron James done? It's like, oh yeah, he's got a school and all those kids have their colleges paid for. How many other athletes do you know have done anything like that at any time? Like there's not very many people who've given back to Akron. And like Rosa, you know, my wife, for all y'all listening or watching, you know, was born in Akron, and we've visited Akron, and you know, Akron needs that help. And LeBron's there to help. And there's, you know, billionaires that won't do that. Billionaires in New York that won't even do it for their own city. So it's good to see some people doing something. And, you know, we've got that First Amendment right, you know, to speak up and be heard. And who are we to say, like, shut up, you know? It's not hurting anybody. It's actually preventing people from getting hurt or trying to.
Exactly. Yeah. And like they're doing the job. When you think like LeBron, like that's amazing that he's giving back to the community. And like, and that goes on to his, like, probably what he feels, maybe, I don't know, his purpose as like a human being on earth, like whatever. But his job, he gets paid to play a sport, and he's doing the work that the state should be doing, that the government should be doing. Like our government, with what we pay in taxes, like they should be investing in education. They should be investing in, you know, infrastructure in schools, and like they're not. So then you have someone like him who's choosing out of the like kindness of his heart, and because he wants to make an impact, is choosing to do the work that our local officials and our government officials won't do.
Exactly. When I was a kid, and it's exactly like going back to this whole argument of the same people getting mad about LeBron James speaking up or whatever, or who else, you know, whoever else is speaking up in the NBA, or the same people back in the 90s when I think it was Charles Barkley. It might have been Charles Barkley or another athlete. Their quote was, "I'm not a role model. I just play basketball." They got mad at him for saying that. And now someone is actually using his clout, using his visibility, using his wealth to help people and be the role model. And they're mad about that. And if it was Charles Barkley, if I'm quoting the same thing, he was the one just like getting mad too about the same thing about like, and I just don't get it. It's like, damned if you do, damned if you don't, you know? And it's just a crazy time. It really is a crazy time. But how have you been, other than you know this craziness, politics aside?
The panic, the daily sort of just like shimmering panic.
Okay, so you get it. Let's go back to February when all seemed well. Where were you?
I was in San Francisco, in Hamilton, which was a huge dream of mine, and also one of Rosa's dreams for me.
For like, you, yes.
Yeah, like
yes.
From college, you know, for people listening, I worked in the admissions office. Rosa was my admissions advisor, like one of the first people I spoke to when I got into AMDA. Just really helped me out with, you know, things that I could do financially, and just from the very beginning has been there. And so I've been auditioning for AMDA. I love her. Yeah. I love her so much.
Yeah.
I've been auditioning for Hamilton, like all throughout AMDA pretty much. I mean, well, my last semester through up until, you know, I got it. So it was about 3 years. And every time I got an audition, I would like text her, or if I was working in the office, I could be like, I have an audition next week or something. And we were always like, and I'd get really close. And then finally when I got it, I think Rosa was, I mean, my parents were the first people I told, and then my godmother. And I think Rosa was like the third person I told.
Yeah.
Like I was so stoked. She's been there that whole time. So it was finally there, San Francisco.
I have to say, she gets so excited about your career. I think more excited than mine, personally. I mean, you're doing a lot cooler stuff than I have done, but she gets
Not
so,
really.
I mean, you've been on Mean Girls.
Yeah,
You're
she's
beautiful.
the best.
Yeah. And she loves you. And like,
And she's seen it all,
yeah, yeah. And it's
pretty
been a
much.
journey.
Except for Hamilton,
Not yet.
because we just didn't get to. Yeah.
Yeah, no.
But she was definitely, I know that that's on the list when we
It's
come
on the
back.
list. So it's February. You're doing Hamilton, and
Hmm.
we're talking about
Hmm.
coming back. What happened that you have to come back to? You got shut down, or what happened?
Yeah.
It was a tour.
No,
It was
it was a tour. Yeah. So it was the Aunt Peggy tour.
okay.
And we got shut down March 11th, I believe. San
Mhm.
Francisco was one of the first cities to close
Wow.
everything up. But it wasn't at that point, it was the beginning of the end. But we kind of didn't really think it was going to last. So we were like, okay, we had
Yeah.
our matinee.
Yeah.
And then we had a meeting and they were like, we're not coming back tonight, but they didn't say
Wow.
anything about the next day or the weekend or what was going to happen. So, I went back to my place, and in the days that I think that night was when we got the email that was like, we're going to, shut down. We're going to be like 2 weeks and just stay in the area,
Yeah. Yeah.
We didn't officially get the call that like it was done and to go home until maybe 2 or 3 days before April began.
Did you have any idea? Like, I spoke to another friend of mine who was doing an off-Broadway show, and there was rumors circulating that they might shut down or they might postpone. Was there anything of that nature going on as, Corona started making more headlines in around February?
Yeah, I mean, well, not really, because San Francisco was really one of the first places, like
Yeah.
even before New York, like we closed before Broadway did.
Yeah.
And we there were still tours going out. I know the Once on This Island tour was still like doing or moving around. A couple of our Hamilton tours were still I think there was one in Florida at the time. And
Okay.
they because they treat each tour as its own. We're all under the Hamilton umbrella, but
Yeah.
there's like protocol. So they were trying to do it state by state and no one knew what was going on. So because I think it was the San Francisco governor or mayor, I can't remember, but maybe I don't know. But she said like anything over 1,000 seats,
Yeah.
we're
You're
shutting
done.
it down. And
Yeah.
there was like the Golden Gate Theater or something, and they were like, oh, well, we'll just not sell. I think it was like where Harry Potter was. They were
Yeah.
like, well, we'll just not sell the 1,000 seats so that we can keep going. And then they were
Yeah.
like, anything over 500, done. So she was not playing around. Thank God. I mean,
Yeah. No, that's crazy, because imagine if it would have gone on, like what would have happened? Because I'm in
yeah.
Texas, and our governor decided to open early, and
Florida too.
Florida and Texas are just like the competing. Have you seen that meme? Speaking of Harry Potter, where it's like, why is it when there's always trouble, it's you three, and it was California, Texas, and Florida,
Oh my God.
and it was like Ron, Harry,
No, but
and
that's so
Hermione.
good.
Yeah, yeah, and it's true. It was one of those things where once New York shut down, we're like, okay, that means business, because New
Mhm.
York and California, and then Texas got
Yeah.
it got cocky, like I think May 1st, and
Mhm.
we ended up getting pounded bad by
Yeah.
COVID. In my county, in my city, we were making the news like every night because we were losing like 30 or 40 people a day. It's crazy. We're overrun, and it's finally like calming down. Like I think
Yeah.
we're trying to
Yeah.
we're containing it now, but it got crazy for a little bit. And
Yeah.
for me, prior to the shutdown, like it seemed like everything's gonna be awesome. Like I was going after serious regulars. Like life seemed good. Like
Yeah, Rosa told me, you're
life
like,
was
this was
good.
your year. Like, this
Yeah.
was good.
Like
Yeah.
like 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 seriously, it was
The
like
momentum, like people were calling you. Like, yeah, I
yes,
know.
I felt so good to be
I know.
wanted. And then
Hmm.
I was pushed aside into the
And
alley.
then everyone, yeah, we were all just like, and that's, I've heard it from a couple people too. They were like, 2020, I was feeling the momentum of my career. And
Yes.
even me, I was like, this is going to be great.
Yeah.
Um, and then we all kind of just got like
Yeah.
bubble
Because you had a
burst.
huge year planned, right?
Yeah.
It was a big
Yeah.
year.
It was my first time being a principal on a contract. I was going to like
Mm-hmm.
save up enough money to eventually buy some property somewhere, which was
Yeah.
one of my goals, like before 30. You
Yeah.
know, I was going to get my loans paid off.
Yeah.
And I'll just have to do that, 2022 or something.
Yeah. Here's the deal. We'll go back to where you were shut down in just a little bit, but I was talking to another
Mhm.
friend of mine who was having a very rough year too. They had a really tragic loss in their family on Christmas Day. She was
Oh,
struggling, in LA, actually, restaurants closed, the one she worked at, so she lost her job, and it's just like needed
yeah.
a glimmer of some good news. And she shared a quote she heard last night or the night before, and it was, the rest of the year is the best of the year. And 2020, as crappy as it's been since March, is far from over. There's several
Right.
months, left. There's so much can happen, like
Hmm.
right now, like things are opening up for you and for
Right.
everybody, that you don't know what's going to happen from one week to the next, and what you
Hmm.
thought was going to happen, or what might have been because of all this COVID nonsense, could end up being something positive,
Yeah.
so it's like it's it's trying. I think I got to a point of thinking positively in the last
Hmm.
maybe month. So with that being said, I think we were talking about this before. When did the stir crazy kind of doubt start kicking in? If it did for you, was it a
Mm.
month in? Like, was it mid-April? Or are you thinking,
Mm, I mean, the beginning, I feel like with everyone else, like we were like, oh,
yeah,
I'm good at this quarantine thing.
mm-hmm.
I'm gonna chill. Like, okay, I'll be inside. I don't like people anyway. Like, this is
Yeah,
great. Yeah, I was in LA because we still didn't know. This was before they were like, okay, shut it down completely. You're not coming back. Because Hamilton was supposed to be in San Francisco until September.
September.
So yeah, I was in LA staying with my best friend from college, and her and I were just, at her house. She was working from home.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was really fun. I think once they told us, you're done, and I packed up my life and moved in with my parents because I couldn't go to New York, was super, super
Yeah,
hot spot, and I didn't even have a room there.
yeah,
Um, so I came coming back to live with my parents after not living with them for 8 years was really tough.
yeah,
And like, even though they live in Florida, which is great, where they live now is kind of Trumpy.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, they live near the Tampa area,
Okay.
and there's like a house in the neighborhood that literally is like Trump 2020, F your
Yeah,
feeling. On the banner, I'm like, did you have that made? I've never seen a banner that says that.
it blows my
Um,
mind. Yeah,
yeah, and just being around, I tried to get out as much as I could, as far as like riding my bike, and then I was noticing I would ride my bike, and because I also didn't grow up in this area, I grew up in Orlando.
okay,
So it was coming back to a brand new space
yeah,
that didn't feel like my childhood home.
yeah,
So I would ride my bike and I'd notice like, oh, there are no Black people
yeah,
in this neighborhood.
yeah,
Oh, okay. So I was kind of like, it made me feel some type of way. And this was before
yeah,
Maud Aubrey. Um, so, and I would ride my bike at the same time, the same route in the neighborhood every day. And it wasn't until like the end of, or the beginning of the second week when like people would sort of like look at me, like they'd be washing their cars and they'd look up, and I was like, oh, I realized I'm the only Black person here. And I was like, well, being a woman, and this was me like trying to make myself feel better. And I was like, because, and it just sucks to say, but it's like, I'm a woman. So I feel like if I were a young Black man, I wouldn't be doing this.
Yeah.
Like I just wouldn't ride my bike. And then Ahmaud Arbery got shot and I just stopped riding my bike. I stopped running because also with Florida, like it's, and I think it's like an open carry state.
Yeah, no, it is.
Yeah. And so it was really, so once I stopped going outside in that way, I was kind of like feeling the stir crazy energy. And then also just the weight of the whole, you know, a second civil rights resurgence and like coming to terms with that and having conversations with my parents that we never had about race. And it was just like a lot
do you think
to be dealing with.
Yeah. With all that being said, because I understand Florida and the Ahmaud Arbery, that was in Georgia, wasn't it? That was in Georgia.
Yeah.
So I lived in Jacksonville, Florida, which is the Florida-Georgia line. And, you know, since you got pulled away from the industry, which when you're in it, especially with you, with the theater, being in a musical, which is 8 shows a week, your mind is pretty much occupied by the show.
Yeah.
If you're auditioning, like for me, if it's commercial season, like right now coming up in the fall, it would have been commercial season if I had been in New York. And what they call, well, I mean, they used to call is, it's not pilot season, not principal season. It's going to come to me. But basically when they have all the filler characters, the guest stars, the co-stars, the recurrents, when they start casting that sort of stuff, your mind is on that, you know, and checking breakdowns and studying for auditions, you know, working stuff out. All that is when you have all this time and the news starts running out of things to report. And it's just highlighting the negative in the country in a crazy way, in a crazy way. Because and it's different from area to area, because going back to what I said about, I understand Florida. I lived in Jacksonville in 2007, 2008. So our cell phone cameras were very, very crappy. I had a flip phone, a Razor. And I remember, and what I remember specifically about Jacksonville, Florida, was living in Jacksonville after living where I live now and grew up. I grew up in South Texas, so on the very southern tip of Texas. You know, I'm on the border, so we only know brown and white. You know, Mexicans and a couple white people. No Black people, maybe 2 or 3 families, like it's, and I'm not even exaggerating, of Black families or Indian families. Like there was just a few. And over the last 20 years, that's changed a lot as we've gotten, you know, more hospitals and stuff like that. So more opportunities are opening up. So I never understood the black and white racism, you know what I mean? Until I lived in Jacksonville, Florida, where it was very, very racist on you know, like, you know, blacks and whites, there's still issues. And the police shootings, that's when I first heard about them. I remember a specific case. It was 2007. Jacksonville was people were celebrating that we had the most murders in the nation. You know, they had beat out New Orleans. Like they were like averaging a murder a day. And
why?
Why? I don't know. And that was one of the things, like, yeah, we got the most murders. Like we're you know, third, or like we were like third last year, but we beat out New Orleans, and they were just so happy about that. And I remember in the first 3 weeks, there was like 3 shootings where the police had shot, you know, Black men.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest cases I remember was at a gas station, and this is a true story. So my best friend and I lived in Jacksonville, so he's from down here as well, but we were living there, and there was this gas station that we would go to all the time, and it was where the police would have their breaks. That's every single night. Every time we were there was a cop off duty or just getting a snack or getting water or whatever they're getting. And this one particular night, 3 teenagers decided to rob the store, and I guess they didn't do their due diligence and checking out the place and realizing cops are there all the time. And of course, when they were robbing the place, as it was happening, Guess who shows up on their break to get their snacks?
Yeah.
The police. Same story. They apprehend 2 young men. The other one started running. What did he do? He reached for something in his waistband. That's what the police officer said. Police officer shot him. He got killed. What happened to the other 2 that were involved in the armed robbery? Well, they were charged for the murder of that kid.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And it's hard to believe that that's even a thing. My best friend, the same one that lived with me, like we remember hearing that story, he's in law school. Fast forward a few years later. So it's like that was 2008. So in 2012, 2013, he's in law school and they study that exact case. And the reason being was that due to their actions, that would led to the murder of this young man. And that's crazy because that's also a thing in Georgia too.
Yeah.
It's one of the craziest things on earth. And so
all these workarounds,
it's crazy. And, and it's really a crazy thing to think that was, what would have happened if that would have been caught on tape or on camera now? Like, how would that have changed? Would the court would have ruled it the same? You know what I mean? And it's just, it's a crazy time. And you're all this stuff is being pointed out, and you think right when George Floyd happened, that was the penultimate event, I think, during the shutdown.
Yeah.
We thought that would end there, and then there's been like 2 or 3 more.
Oh, more. Yeah.
The big ones that have happened that have set off more riots. So it's crazy to think what's happening, and what's going to happen now. And how's that going to affect the rest of America and after the election? And, it got crazy political right now, but it's just like, these are things that were pointed out.
It's kind of, and like you said, like, when you're in a show, when you're working, your mind is occupied. I mean, there's only so much that we can devote our attention to, but because we don't have our jobs, this is all that we see, and we're all kind of on the same page as far as what news we're seeing, whether you're watching Fox or MSNBC or CNN, whatever, they're all still sort of talking about the same thing. It's just whatever spin they want to put on it.
Exactly.
So it's hard to not be, crazy political, because it's like, this is all we have. Like, for once, everyone is like paying attention, or mostly everyone is paying attention. And the reason why, I think one of the big reasons why the protests have been so successful and ongoing and so large is because so many people have been out of work. Even with the global pandemic, it's like we're willing to risk our lives, and the great thing is that multiple sources have shown, like, the protests don't indicate necessarily a spike in cases, which is good, or else New York would be in huge trouble.
That's the thing that I was talking about with someone earlier, like when the first big protest happened right after George Floyd, especially in New York and in LA, was that there's going to be some group that's going to be very, very mad, no matter on which side. Because if there was those big protests with thousands and thousands of people, and yes, people were wearing masks, a lot of people were not wearing masks. If those numbers would have shot up, then, that would have made sense. And then, there still would have been the people still mad about the George Floyd thing. But if those numbers, and they didn't, and which is what I'm surprised about, they didn't go up like they thought they would. All these people in middle America that were kept in their houses, I'm surprised they didn't start protesting too.
Well, they did. They
at the state capitals.
With guns.
It was at Minnesota.
It was Michigan. Michigan did it too.
Yeah.
Because I was actually very surprised with Michigan. I realized I'm learning more about Michigan during this election. I didn't know that Michigan was also like a swing state or a battleground state. I thought it was like a lot more progressive, just because the only thing I know about Michigan is UMich. So I'm like, oh, I know a lot of people that went to school there. But then when I saw those protests, I was like, oh gosh, I really only know Michigan because of their musical theater program, and it's obviously way more than that. So I mean, there were definitely people, they were like, they literally took up arms, and they were up in arms, taking up arms.
Oh, that's right. They're keeping us from working, and
and they want haircuts, and like, you know, and I get people going crazy.
Yeah.
But it's just also looking at the way that that the protests are received. Just, you know, on one end and the other, one is met with such force, and the fact that you know, COVID or curfews during the pandemic make a lot of sense. My family lives in the Dominican Republic, and there's still a curfew. I think now it's 6. It used to be 5. But New York didn't have a curfew because of COVID. They had a curfew because of the protests. And just kind of seeing like what the government is prioritizing and what it isn't. And then also at the end of the day, I think like having each state sort of deal with it on their own was a big, and I don't think I'm like alone in that. That's not a hot take, you know, having some sort of federal legislation to be like, everyone needs to wear a mask, or, you know, just like every state for themselves. Like, it's just delaying us opening again.
Because because I lived in one of those states where we opened up, and I think I've gone through this in other podcast episodes, but our plan, I think it was much like Florida's plan and like some other states, was that we had a phase plan. Phase 1, you know, we would open at 25% capacity. Phase 2, I think it was gyms and 50% capacity.
Gyms was phase 2.
And we were, it was very early on. Gyms opened up, and we would only move on to the next phase, according to our governor, Greg Abbott. He said, we're going to open up, you know, if the cases did not rise.
Right.
I don't know what happened during this whole thing, but cases that weekend when we opened up spiked. They did. They spiked.
Yeah.
And that's understood. That was going to happen. But we didn't hold steady to see how it would play out. No, we're going to automatically move on to the gyms and the bars. They opened up bars. And then by that time, it was getting close to Memorial Weekend, so the other bookend weekend of the summer. And we live by the beach, which is like an hour and a half away. And that place was packed. And sure enough, down here, we ended up spiking again. Let's just keep moving the phase to phase 3. We open up at 75%.
Like, why don't you guys just
stop? Exactly. And the one thing was masks were not mandatory.
Same
mandatory
here.
At all.
It's like, if you're going to start opening in phases, at least have people put protection on. Like, you know, I had like an elderly man, because we live in a 55 up community. And so just like the grocery store and everything. And I was, you know, coming from California, so I always had my mask on. And now coming back this time, I remember, because the first thing I did when I came back was go to the DMV. Everyone had their masks on. I was like, Mom, I'm so proud of Florida. Like, you guys really turned it around. But when I was here the last time in April, no one had anything. And I cannot tell you how many times I'd go to the grocery store, I had my mask on, and it would just be like very, very old people doing their groceries
without masks.
No mask, reaching over me to get something, and I would just be like, oh, okay, like, do you want, I'll move out of the way, just coughing into the wind, like just coughing, not covering their mouths, and I feel like, you know, like really old people and babies are so similar, like, you know, when kids cough and it's just like, like
but the difference is babies don't know anything. And you don't take babies out, and there's Oh man, Rosa
Exactly.
and I
I'm like,
went
if you're able to drive to the grocery store, then you have the
have
sense
to have
to know to cover your cough. And like,
exactly.
it's
And
just,
people were just bouncing from house to house. We're
hmm
Latinos,
yeah,
and people love barbecues on Memorial Weekend. There's
yeah.
birthday parties. I remember 4th of July weekend, there was parties all around the neighborhood.
Hmm.
And of course, McAllen, Texas is in the news week after week after week. We're getting overrun with COVID. Our hospitals can't keep up.
Yeah.
They had to bring in nurses, and even then we're running out of supplies. We're also statistically, we were at one point last year, the year before, the fattest county in the nation,
Hmm.
meaning we had a lot of cases of diabetes, like a
Oh,
good high percentage of diabetes, which makes you a little bit more prone to death when you
yeah.
have COVID, and that didn't help. So a lot of the diabetic medication, insulin stuff that they needed was is being used up at these
Yeah.
hospitals, and you would hear stories about, oh yeah, my mom and dad are in the hospital together, or I just lost my. There was one point where I saw a young lady said her tío, her uncle, passed away like on a Friday or Thursday, and it was Tuesday, and she said they still haven't located his body. You know,
Hmm.
it was just like it was just
Yeah.
very, very crazy. And around that time, it was like I think July when this really started kicking off. Like I got an audition for a movie, and it was like I was happy, and I was like, okay, we're gonna be careful when we shoot this movie. And I did my audition. I think I felt really good despite all the rust, of not taping for like
Hmm.
six months. And a week later, my agent's like, "Yeah, they stopped casting. It's not happening now. We don't know when it's going
Yeah.
to happen." And then,
Totally
sure
halted.
enough, Texas was in limbo for the last month and a half because of we're like the hot spot in the nation. Florida and Texas competing as
Yeah.
always for
Ah, right.
crazy. Uh, so yeah, it was at that time I had a scare with COVID where
Oh.
I had I have asthma, and
Hmm.
every year I get a really bad respiratory infection. It's just without fail every summer. And luckily it just ended up being that. I went and got
That's
myself
good.
tested, the baby
Yeah.
was fine, Rosa was fine. But it was in that time of that point where I was like, you know what? Tomorrow is not promised. And I
Hmm.
do not know what I'm going to be doing uh, in 5 months from now. I don't know if the industry is going to pick back up. I
Hmm.
don't know how I feel. I don't know. Like if I had caught this and I had died, like what would I have left my daughter and my wife with? What kind of
Yeah.
legacy would I have left behind? And I don't know if you knew Amanda Klutz and Nick Cordero, and that our trajectories, like family wise, were almost mirrored.
Hmm.
Rosa and Amanda were pregnant at the same time. Our baby is a month older than theirs. And, it was documented, like you saw what was happening with him.
Yeah.
And at least he has like a big legacy to leave behind. And I
Hmm.
started thinking like, what do I have, to leave behind? And uh, I started thinking about, wait, let's not be selfish here. Like I have a lot of friends in this industry. What is everyone else doing? What are they feeling right now? Because there was, I don't know about you, but for me, like I had some points in this shutdown where I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to work again, or
Oh yeah.
industry's going to open up again, or what's going to happen. Like I'm in South Texas, so even if it does open up, I'm not in New York, I'm not in LA,
Right.
I'm 5 hours south of Austin
Yeah.
even. So like, am I going to be out? So
Hmm.
did you have some of those moments too? Or
Yeah. I mean, definitely. Like, definitely, COVID. It for me, it was less like COVID related and more just like the industry realizing. And I mean, I always knew, but just kind of the disparity of and the inequity in like and the whiteness, the history of Broadway and
yeah,
theater.
the Great
And
White Way.
yeah, because I'm not, unfortunately, not yet, but like a film and TV person. I haven't really kind of like
Yet.
gotten into it yet. Yeah, yet.
Yet.
But so I don't really know like what Hollywood is like. But for me, I'm like, oh, film and TV, I see more representation. And then I hear from some people in the industry, they're like, it's still, there's still that rub there. I think just
There is, and there's still like, from my experience personally with TV film,
Mm-hmm.
there you'll see some forced casting too,
Yeah.
where you know, I'm a Latino, but I'm a light skin. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I can play Arabic, I can play white, I can play whatever. But you also don't want to be handed a role just because it's just handed to you because they're
As
trying
a, like a
to be
quota.
woke. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're gonna meet
Yeah.
this quota, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you see that happening,
Mm-hmm.
and it's I'd be frustrated too because
Yeah.
but at the same time, would I be? Because I just had like an audition where they said it's like anybody but a Caucasian
Right.
that
And
can
that's the
act.
thing,
It's just like,
it's
wow.
like, but as the actor too, like, is being, because I'm I'm Latina and black, but like I'm lighter
Yeah,
skinned black woman and a
yeah,
darker skinned Latina. So
yeah,
it's like, as when I go in for roles that don't have any like Latin aspect to it, and they're strictly like black, um, or go in for roles that aren't specified, and if I were to get it or to get far, there's always that sort of thing in the back of my head. I'm like, am I a quota filler, or and you start watching TV shows and you realize like there's always like one black guy or like an
always.
Asian girl with like a stutter, or
Yeah,
the black guy is gay, or the
there's a
Latino is,
kink.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. The Latina comes from a broken home and doesn't know her family, and then also turns
yeah,
out to be gay. I'm describing the characters on Glee. Like
yeah,
those are the
yeah,
actual characters that Ryan Murphy
yeah,
created.
yeah,
And there's just, but then you look at these people, these careers that he started for these people, and
yeah,
someone like Alex Newell,
yeah,
there was the first like trans representation in a TV show that I remember.
yeah,
Um, and that just opened my world, but it was also like, he just hits all of these boxes, and you
yeah.
kind of wonder, like, are you doing it, what is this serving, and how do those actors feel like, oh, I can't just be, I have to be the Asian girl with the stutter, I can't
Yeah.
be the girl who is the cheerleader who falls in love with the jock who gets the solos.
Or the
I'm the
Naya
goth
Rivera,
stutter. Yeah, yeah. And Naya
having
Rivera, who was extremely talented, and she was the gay, fiery Latina.
Latina,
Like,
the
yeah, she
spicy
was
Latina.
spicy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would have to say I love to play devil's advocate though, because
Mm-hmm.
it's very easy for us to get chips on our shoulders being the POCs, the people of color in the
Yeah.
industries, and not seeing people that look like us throughout
Mm-hmm.
our childhood. Like when I grew up, what shows was I watching? What shows were you watching? TGIF? What was on TGIF? Was that like Home Improvement? Was it Full House? Like Growing Pain?
Yeah.
Like all these white families, and like, yeah,
Yeah.
Full House, it was just a single dad and like his brother-in-law and
Yeah.
their quirky little buddy. But like, we didn't see a lot of like characters like us. I mean, the closest thing was
Yeah.
Fresh Prince or Family
Yeah.
Matters.
George Lopez.
George Lopez is a big,
Um,
because
yeah.
we know Valente, who played Ernie, George's best
Yeah.
friend, and he's given back so much. Like he went to my
Mm-hmm.
undergrad, and like he's just a wealth of knowledge. And
Yeah.
like, but when it comes to other faces that you recognize, like you don't see that often. And
Yeah.
going back to playing devil's advocate for Ryan Murphy, do you think maybe he was playing it safe just to start breaking through so that other
Oh,
parts could be played?
definitely.
Because
Yeah.
it's
And I
like one
can
of
see
those
that.
things.
It's like, we wouldn't have seen it otherwise,
Exactly. Yeah.
There was no other show at the time like Glee where they're like, we're in high school, we're a Glee club where we are, making this cool. Acapella blew up, and then you had Pitch Perfect,
Yep.
1 and 2, like
Yeah.
that. I feel like that was because of Glee, like, and even going to college, like the first thing I did in college, well, before I went to AMDA, my first college was join an acapella group, Cause like I saw that, and
Yeah.
and someone like Amber Riley, who played
Hmm.
Mercedes, that has
Yeah.
gone on to have an incredible career in doing Dreamgirls on the West End and
Yeah.
all of these amazing things. And like,
Yeah.
I definitely agree with you on that. Like, if we don't see it, whether, and as the actor too, when I
Yeah.
do go in for these roles, you
Hmm.
look at the breakdown, you do a little eye roll, and you're like, okay, but what can I bring to this part? And what does it mean to have me play this part and
Yeah.
have a little kid see
Yeah.
me in this part?
Yeah.
And there's always, as the actor, you're always kind of thinking, what what of my essence can I bring to this?
Hmm.
And even if it's like, especially like the, like guest starred, or something that you don't know what the trajectory of the character
Yeah.
is, it's like
Yeah.
you want to get written back on, like,
I
and there's always that possibility.
There's always that possibility. And one thing that I've learned, which they're really trying to cast as realistically as possible, which means they're writing shows for our cultures that aren't as tropey or cliche as like, I'm Latino, so I got to be in Narcos, or I got to play
Yeah.
a cholo, or like, I'm Mexican, but I'm playing a Dominican, like,
Yeah.
like it's just a can. As long as there's a can, if you're Puerto Rican, Dominican, Mexican, like that's what they're seeing sometimes in the
Yeah.
industry. And now they're getting a little bit more,
Nuance.
and realizing, we need a Mexican. Their slang is a little bit different than Dominican slang. Like, I found out through my Dominican friends in New York that my last name means a butt. So mueve la chapa, la chapa, la chapa. I'm like, whoa, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of a treat in the DR, you know what I mean? And the other thing that I noticed too is that you can get a breakdown now, and it doesn't mean anything.
Right.
As long as you go in there and you tell the story. Like, I've gone in legit so many times, and the breakdown is stocky, balding Latino. It could be with a beard or whatever. It could just say stocky, balding Latino with glasses and a kid that's 15. Like, it could just write down my whole life story, and they'll cast like an Asian guy or a black guy, or you don't know, and a lot of times they don't know.
They don't know. That's the thing. Yeah.
They don't know, and I think as long as you go in there and you do the work, I think the opportunities are going to be there. And I think now that our voices are being heard, people have to understand that their audiences are changing now, and different people want to see different things. Like, I have spoken to a few people that like male actors that are Latinos in this business, like Ricardo Chavira and David Barrera and Yo Vasquez. You don't know, like, you may not know their names, but if you saw them, you'd recognize them. And for me, it's like growing, in my early 20s, watching them on TV. Like, Ricardo Chavira was on Desperate Housewives. He was Eva Longoria's husband.
Oh, yeah.
And I saw someone that looked like me.
Yeah.
And from the same town. He grew up here in McAllen and in San Antonio. And I'm like, that's possible for me. And now we're going to start seeing that more and more and more. And I think it's just, I think tides are turning for us. But a lot of that happened over this pandemic. I really do believe a lot of these voices is like, now you sit back and you can think about, I think a lot of people had a lot of time to think about, like, man, these auditions this last year were really weird. Like, were they for me, or who are they for? And you're watching all these shows on Netflix and in Hulu, and it's like, who are these shows for? Like, where is it for me? And, you're doing a show that changed the game with Hamilton.
Yeah.
And that's a beautiful thing to be a part of that the history of that, like, literal history.
Yeah. No, I feel really lucky, like, especially to be in this show during the pandemic, just because, one, it was one of my huge goals. So it was like, I got to realize a goal before, things took a halt, or, so, and I know I have something to go back to just because of the clout of the show itself. Like, I know I'm going to have a job whenever we are allowed to have jobs. And that I can't say the same thing for a lot of my friends in this industry. So I'm very blessed in that front. And just also being a part of a team where the producers and the creative team, you know, you've got Lynn, and he's a Latino, he's light-skinned Latino, but like he is still, he's not like a white guy, you know, and he will get on Zoom calls and he can relate in a way, and talk to us, and also he has this incredible like capacity for listening and for empathizing. And it's just really nice to be able to get on a call with our production team and say like, this is how I feel as a POC, and this is, you know, how this time makes me feel. And whether it's a criticism of your time in the company or like, for me, I didn't have anything to criticize, because I was like, this is amazing. Like, you guys have been treating me so well. But they're just so, I don't know, they're just so receptive to like talking to us as people. And I think as kind of doing a circle with what we were talking about with the NBA, I used to feel like this with my producers and the creative team, like, oh, I am, you know, the only Black understudy here in this building, and I'm understudying a role that's that was always played by a white girl. And if I say something, will I lose my job? Because I worked so hard to get this job. And in the room, there were no other Black girls. They were white girls.
Were you
and there were a
the
couple
difficult
of Asian
actress?
girls.
Yeah.
Yeah. Am I the difficult one? Am I the, you know, the problem? So now with everything, it's like we have finally, as POCs, we can say like, we have our voice, you know, we can speak for ourselves without the fear of like losing our job and the fear of losing our token job. Because we know that there are shows, that there are people out there that want to see our stories.
Exactly.
So
there are people that want to see our stories, exactly what you said. And I think one of the hardest things for me in my career was finding that voice and realizing like we can speak up. And if something is not sitting well with us, whether it's how you were treated by the director or a castmate or whatever, it's just, I think young actors or like people like we're like being newer in the industry, even if you've been there in a few years, like you still don't want to be labeled as the difficult actor, or you hear these crazy stories about, you know, someone's career, just that's it, because they might have handled it inappropriately. But what was the chain of events that led to that? You know, did they hold it in for so long? It's kind of like, you know, I'm married, obviously, and it's like Rosa and I, we talk it out. It's if there's an issue that we have with each other as a married couple, as soon as possible, because we can't hold on to something until one day we're just going to say something we don't mean, and it's out of anger. And it's the same thing in their career. Like one day it's just going to blow up. And there's just a, you know, it's a fine line still, I think, because, you know, I also don't want people to tiptoe around me as well. Like feel like they need to walk around eggshells, you know, and feel like they need to say, well, you know, Latinx people, it's just
Latinx.
I have to say Latinx. Like I'm fine with it. You know what I mean? Like, or it's just like, I don't need like white people to feel like, you know, they need to tiptoe around me.
Yeah, but I do.
But watch what you're saying, you know.
But it is nice to just like, that's the thing. I don't need people to tiptoe around me, but I think with this time, white people especially have taken a step sort of outside themselves to just do a little bit more work and to learn about other things that aren't like outside themselves. And this is just a very like the stereotypical, like, not, you know, of course not all white people. But it's just like they, you know, so that I don't have to when, so that when the choreographer is looking at everyone and saying, hey, why don't you make this, I want this move to be more urban, and looks at the one Black girl who is a trained ballerina from Juilliard and says, more urban, you know what I mean?
Right,
and she's
girl.
like, what?
Yeah.
No, I don't, because I'm not a hip hop dancer. I'm a ballerina, looking like those little things, and educating themselves on what microaggressions are. So I remember at the beginning of this, at the beginning of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter resurgence, I had all these friends, white friends, just checking in, if I ever did anything, or what about this? What's this article? And I'm like, I'm not going to explain. I'm not Google.com. Google is a microaggression. Google this. Like, it's nice to not have to be the fountain of knowledge. I'm so glad they're taking the time to educate themselves. But, having a friend come to you and be like, well, what's the difference between Mexican and Puerto Rican? And what is this? It's like, that's
an ocean.
I'm not, you look it up. Look it up.
Yeah. All you Latinxes, I love you though, but what's the difference?
Just like, but it's all kind of the same, or like, you guys all speak Spanish, or like, it's just kind of like, I mean, we do all speak Spanish, and whether you call it, a frijole, habichuela, like whatever, it's still a bean. It's a bean is a bean.
Yeah.
But it's nice to see now, and like you said, in breakdowns, looking at a character that's, I'm looking for a Mexican male, and you see in the text, like when the character does use slang, that it is proper slang. Yeah. Like, you don't have you don't have a Mexican guy saying huepa or something. It's not the same.
I went in for an audition once, and I ran into a really good friend of mine, and my friend grew up a lot. Like when he was younger, and he's been in it a lot longer than I have, and he could have been labeled in his earlier days as a difficult actor, and he was very dead set in his ways. And I mean, he would argue with casting directors or directors, like, and he just an impulsive young man is what he was, but he's grown up in the last 6 years. And one of the things is like, maturity. He's gotten married, he has a kid, and the last few conversations I had with him were very, very eye-opening in terms of the work. And it's just like what you said, when you read a script and you hear like you see some slang, like, like I'm gonna say way, not like, or vato, like I'm Mexican, you know what I mean? Yeah. And I'm not gonna say papi, hey papi, hey papi. Yeah. I'm not gonna say papi. I'm gonna say hey vato, hey way. And we were looking over a scene and going in for the same audition, and just the name of the daughter was like Giovanna or something like that. And he's like, what is this? This is like, we're from Honduras. Like, this is an Italian name. Nobody in this area would have named their daughter that. And he changed the name in the audition in the room. And I'm God. That's one way to do it, but it's just like another way to look at it. It's like, sometimes you read the script, I'm like, yeah, we wouldn't say that.
Right. And that's the thing. It's like, it's all about tact. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm not going to go in there and start correcting a casting director. If it comes to the point where I do get the job,
you can talk it over with the director.
And we can talk it over. Exactly. Yeah. But I definitely get what you mean. Because I know people, actors, and even like with POC actors where it's like, I don't want to be labeled as like the difficult Black girl, but there are some difficult, you know what I mean? Like there are just people that don't have tact, and you can't, and like that, it's like, I can't really blame that on race. Like that's just your personality. Difficult. Yeah. You are. Yeah. And I get some people just, and there are things that are definitely worth fighting for. And sometimes you do have to show your teeth. Yeah. And if it's, and if it's like, this is the hill I'll die on, like if we don't see eye to eye on this, then goodbye. Yeah. I get that, but not every situation is a do or die moment.
Yeah. Like Ray Fisher right now. He's picking a big fight right now with DC. And I'm like, wow. you know, and that's like, there's no details. So we don't even know what the actual incident is. It's just a very public incident. And, you know, it's one of those things to see how it plays out. You know, a lot of people are wondering, like, are you being difficult, or was there some validity to this? Like, why aren't the other stars speaking up? You know, like, they would have spoken up, but like maybe they wouldn't have. You know, like Jason Momoa actually spoke up and got his back, you know,
Yeah.
today. And it's just,
And what work? Because it just said, all I know is that it was like allegations of like abuse on set.
exactly. There's no details. They've kept it
Yeah.
really hush hush. And
But they didn't say it was race related, or if it was like sexual abuse or what, or like,
there's nothing.
right. But I
And
mean, I know he's black, so
yeah.
like you,
And,
but I don't know.
yeah, and you know, of course, there's a rumor mill about, you know, maybe there was something that Joss Whedon said and the way Ray handled it, but that's just one incident. So I don't see why it would lead to this huge, epic fight where there's an investigation from DC and Warner Media, and
Yeah.
it'll be interesting to play out. But he's sticking to his guns, and you know, you got to
Yeah.
respect the man for, you know.
Exactly. And that's the thing. It's like, if something is worth being extreme, like now it's in the public eye, even though
Yeah.
as a public, you know, we don't know that information. And also like,
We don't. Yeah.
we're not entitled, you know, that's not, it's his life. And
Yeah.
it did, as someone who's completely outside of it, like,
Same.
I don't have the right to judge or to say, you know, whether I believe or not believe, because we have zero information.
Zero.
And I think they're doing it rightfully so. They're handling it internally, which also makes me think a little bit, maybe, I mean, if Warner is like doing an internal investigation, they are maybe there's some validity to it, because they don't want to come out with, you know, their butt in the air.
Exactly.
So,
and what kudos to Ray. He is talking about it, but he's also not airing out any dirty laundry. He's just saying, like, this is how I was treated on set, and it needs to be, the wrongs need to be righted.
Yeah.
And we need to right these wrongs. And he's leaving it at that. Yeah. I mean, he could go on the talk shows. He could go, he's been on podcasts. And of course they're asking about that. And he's like, just got to know that there was some stuff that happened and it needs to be handled. And he's like, my career is like, it could be over, but you know, at least I'm standing up for something I believe in. And I got to respect him for that, because if I was mistreated on set, and this is just, I don't know if it's sad on my part, I was like, I don't know how I would handle it personally.
I don't know either. Yeah.
Especially if it was like something like that from DC, and you're not, you know, like, he's not just one of the supporting actors. He's one of the Justice League members. So that's a huge deal. It's a career thing. And, you know, I pray that everything, you know, comes out well for him, you know.
Me too.
Heck of an actor. Like, I love his acting.
Yeah, there's, you know, and there are definitely instances where people, and we're seeing it more and more come out, whether it's with our employers or our coworkers or even friends, where people have done something and they've done wrong by you, and you know, you've brushed it off, or it's something that's sort of been sitting there, and either those people have now come back around and said, hey, that one time when I did that thing, was that like racist, or was that offensive? Or they'll either come back around on their own, or you now feel, or at least I now feel, that I have a little bit more of a leg to stand on, because immediately when something like that happens, when a microaggression happens, you give the person the benefit of the doubt. You're like, oh, well, they didn't mean it. And then over time you're like, I'm not sure if I'm even remembering that instance correctly. And it's just like, I don't want to make waves, you know?
And for me, I'm a little old school, where we joke, like, me and my friends, we put each other down. That's like how we show love with each other. And a lot of our humor is lowbrow humor. Yeah. But I just don't see how people cannot read the room. Like, before dropping a joke, like, you know, when you can drop a joke, and there are, like, if you're going to joke like that, you can test the water certain ways before dropping it. Like if you know that this person could get your humor, then you can say, like, oh,
your relationship to that person.
Yeah.
And, and I think
it's hard.
It's some of it's joking and jokes gone wrong, and then some of it is just like pure ignorance. Like people don't think, like when the choreographer made that comment to the ballerina, it wasn't like I'm not saying that because like obviously if we were to ask him face to face, you think all Black people are good at hip hop, he would be like, no, absolutely not. But you also sometimes, I'm sure he didn't realize that he was looking directly at her. Kind of like, one of those, but that's what, internal bias is. And it doesn't mean that he's a bad person. It doesn't mean that he dislikes her. He thinks the world of her. She's an incredible dancer. But it's just those little things that come out of just an ignorance. And I don't even use ignorance as a bad word. And I think people are afraid of their ignorance. It's like, who cares? If you're wrong, you're wrong. Let's like learn, let's go, let's move forward. Like it's when you sit in that ignorance that it turns to either a fear of the unknown or a hatred of the unknown.
Or yes, because when I was in grad school, I remember I was having a conversation with one of my Black classmates, and she's a super activist, from the Bay Area. She's about that business. If you want someone on your side, if you want someone to march with, this is the person. And I remember I was having a conversation. This is me coming from little Mexican town, Texas, and I was saying like, so like, I just wanted to like pick her brain. Like this is such an ignorant, like so naive, I'm 27 years old as this is happening. So naive. I'm like, so like an African-American, if they were crossed by another African-American, like I kept saying African-American, she just stops me. She grabs my arm. She's like, Jorge, you can say Black. It's okay. And I'm like, really? Okay. I can?
Okay.
Yeah. And I was like, I felt so stupid, but it was just so naive. I'm like I said,
but it's like, you don't know. I think it was like a video, it was years ago, but people were like, it was like making fun of that. It's like being like African-American. It was a child's essay. And they started, their hand got tired, but they turned it into a meme. They're like, this is how some of y'all talk about Black people. And it first would start with African-American, and then it just switched to AA. The AAs. The AAs. And it was so funny because the kid was just like, abbreviating. But that's how some people move through the world, because you've got, overcorrectors. And people are so afraid of being wrong. And there's literally nothing wrong with being wrong. As long as you're willing to have a dialogue about it and to own that and say like, oh, okay, I was wrong. Could you explain this to me? Or what should I use? And I just think people get so defensive when it's like, actually, I am not, when people are like, oh, Puerto Rican, Dominican, or Puerto Rican, Mexican, and they're like, oh, whatever, same thing. You have to pick your battles. Should I tell them not really? Or should I just, is it going to piss them off? And then you're kind of like hedging yourself. But it's because we would rather not deal with the reaction of of how they deal with their embarrassment. It's just easier to say, okay, whatever. You know?
It's also too, you've probably been around it where there's just some people that are offended about everything. Everything. You know what I mean? And this same classmate that I had, she would, stop class and it's like, we need to have a discussion about that scene that was just happening. And the teacher was like, it was in the script, like it wasn't anything like bad. And there's things like that like happening. So it's when the industry does open up again, I think it's going to be a very interesting new world, because I don't think normal, what we knew it to be pre-COVID, is going to be the same. I mean, they even have like intimacy coaches yet. Have you dealt with an intimacy coach?
I
I have not, because I never get any kissing.
I've never done. Yeah, I mean, in theater we don't really do that.
Yeah,
we should.
Yeah, no, you
But
definitely should in theater.
It was something that I brought up in a show once, and they were like, it was one of those, oh, she's being difficult. It was one of those things. And I was like, all right, well, screw you guys. And then I went to another Broadway show, and the kissing, everything was choreographed. Yeah. Everything. Yeah. Like there wasn't an intimacy coach, but it was part of the blocking. They're like, you're going left, you're going right. Okay, here we go. Whereas the show I did before that, I had to ask for that to happen. Yeah. And then like, it was sort of brushed off. And then later on the actors and we worked it out on our own, but then we said it. And it's like, okay, because once again, you have a problem with being called out for doing something incorrectly, even though it was in a nice way that I asked. And the immediate, I think, response, especially in a power related dynamic, is to make the smaller person feel small. So to make that actor, if the director is standing there and they're like, I'm feeling a little embarrassed. So I'm just going to brush off what you said. Exactly. Like it's not a big deal. And so I think it's going to be different when we come back, like, maybe a little bit more collaborative, and just a little bit more thoughtful of people on set.
You have to. And I think especially with the intimacy coach, because like there's been a lot happening aside from, the Black Lives Matter, COVID, and moving into intimacy coaches is the Me Too movement. And I mean, there's that famous story of, was it Marlon Brando in I think The Last Tango in Paris, where that love scene where he gets the butter and he tries to like stuff it in her and like use it as like
I've never seen it.
She didn't know about it. And, it was just like it was just like borderline rape caught on film. And how many of these indie productions, does this happen to? How many, when I was in grad school, I don't understand what this was, but like with my female cohort, there was this, I don't know if it was a need or this thing where if you got nude that was being artsy, that might have impressed, the professors who have been in the business.
Yeah.
And
like, I'm fine with nudity. I'm like,
I'm so edgy. I'm going to be naked. And I seen, like when I was in grad school, I saw so much nudity and I'm like, I'm a dude. Like, I girls, but I'm just like, was this even necessary? Like, what how is this adding value to the scene? First of all, and what was the purpose?
Right.
Of it? I don't get that. And I think that, this was only
story in any way
7 years ago, and how much has changed since then. Like if we had somebody that was, kind of there, like refereeing or, an intimacy coach saying like, talking to the directors, like, what is the validity of the nudity in this scene? Like, why do you need it? How is it moving the story forward? And I'm sure there's like people listening out of the 5 or 10 people listening right now saying, oh, this guy's being a cuck, or like, oh, he's such a simp right now. But I'm just like, is it really like, how is that? Like, are you watching like the movie or whatever just for boobs? Or are you watching it for entertainment purpose? Like if you want to see boobs or nudity, like just go to Pornhub, like just get your rocks off doing something else. You know what I mean? Like sometimes there is a need
in films and exactly where you're like,
I get it. But how many are those? Like I think like in Game of Thrones, one of the most impressive things for me, Game of Thrones was notorious for nudity. Just we're just gonna have a prostitute now, just hop around naked, and we're in a brothel now. They're all naked.
Like, drop the robe.
For no reason, it's like, oh, look at me, I'm naked now, and like, oh, and we even saw Hodor's little Hodor, and I was just like, and it's just like, whoa, young man. But with all that, being said, one of the most powerful scenes in that whole series was when what's her name, Stark, the redhead young lady, the daughter,
Sansa
Stark. Remember, she gets
Sansa
raped.
Stark?
Yeah. Sansa Stark, she gets raped.
Yeah.
You don't see a thing. All you see is,
Yeah.
Theon Greyjoy's reaction and the noise,
Yeah.
the whimpering. And that was one of the most
Yeah.
powerful scenes. It's just like it's just like Hitchcock said, it's like what you don't see is just more effective.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
that's directing right there. And like this was in a show that just flooded nudity. And one of the most powerful things was this.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I think with Game of Thrones, because at first I was like, oh, it was the shock value of it. And then what happened is they used it to desensitize it so then at the, by season 2 or whatever, I was like, this is normal. This is how people walk around. Concubines exist. This is in this world, even in our world, but this was a very normal thing. And I was desensitized to, all the boobs. And that is not to say that I was like, yeah, this is a great idea, because the amount of naked women versus the amount of naked men, we can get into that. A bunch of the women were naked. We saw, it's just, there's something the media is obsessed with the naked female body. It's highly sexualized, and so, but what they did was they desensitized nudity so that when something like that happened and they didn't show it, it was, it had, the impact was tenfold. Yeah. Which, like you said, I just thought that was really smart on their part.
No, very, very smart. So with that being said, what is happening now with
now
Hamilton, the contract that you were at? How many months left did you have that contract? You said you were going to be there through September.
My contract was up until January 2021.
Okay.
So we were in September. We were going to be in California until September and then start touring. Yeah. So my contract was a year. I think I only did about 4 months of my contract.
Okay.
So what they're doing is they're adding all of the time lost to COVID. Yeah. Once the industry opens up, I'm going to have that added to my contract.
Amazing.
So I will still be working a year with Hamilton. Yeah. So I know that I'll have months and months of paid work.
Good.
When we start having paid working opportunities, amazing. Which is great.
I'm really glad they did that.
I'm yeah, me too. And also I think it makes sense for them too, because having to teach new people a show and get new costumes is
an
audition. A lot of money. Yeah. And it's just why? But I've been doing some self-tape auditions.
Good. Good.
Which have been slowly trickling.
I get it. Yeah.
A lot of it's very interesting to read their COVID procedures on the break, in that.
It's
email.
Weird. It's weird.
Yeah, they're very adamant. They're like, you must quarantine for 2 weeks. You must get a COVID test every single week.
Yep.
Temperature checks and all this stuff. And I'm like, okay, this makes me feel good. Actually,
it makes you feel good.
Weird,
but who do you send that COVID test? Yeah, are you paying for that COVID test yourself? Is that out of pocket, or is that you can keep the receipts and give it to production?
No,
because I had one.
Well, I know at least none of my COVID tests have cost money.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good. Good.
Do they cost money over there?
Yeah.
Do they?
The one I took, yeah.
But did you take a rapid one or something?
No, I took it at
Is that why?
No, I called the number for COVID testing sites, and then my insurance covered it. Thankfully. But at that same, with that, who's going to pay for that?
They came in with they definitely will.
No, they have to. They
definitely will.
They would have to. Production would have to. I think also, are you in these breakdowns? Is it saying that you have to only be a local hire, or because I know in New York they'll only take some for production, some productions only New York local. When I auditioned, I had a self tape. Is only Texas hire, and I'm thinking
yeah, right.
Yeah.
No, there's some
like that.
There's New York locals, and then some of them are saying, which was fine when I was over there, but some of the now in my slates, I have to say where I'm located.
Yeah.
So for this like HBO thing, I was like, I'm in Florida, but I have a place in New York that I'm driving up to before this films even, where I can quarantine for 2 weeks. And then like, I will be a New Yorker. Like I have a place in New York. So I think that they're really not trying to, fly anybody around, if they don't need to. And then for the stuff that's filming, and like, there's a couple of things that filming in Canada.
That's where I want to work.
I know, me too. I'm like, I really want to go. There was Canada, and I think at one was Australia, but I think they stopped.
Unless you're famous.
Yeah, Australia is. I mean, you can't really get over there right now with everything. But
I mean, you can if you're like A-list, like celebrity.
Right. I cannot.
We can't. No.
We cannot.
No.
But yeah, like just on a tangent, I was trying to, I've been learning Korean, and
Nice.
thanks. I was like, oh, I found this like work program, because I'm like, I was telling my mom, I need to work. I can't, I've been on unemployment for 6 months. And as long as my job makes what the unemployment rate is, or maybe hopefully higher so that I can pay my rent, I'm going to take it. Like, and it sucks because I want to do something in my industry, but for now it's like, I need to do something. So I was looking at this place, and I was like, you know what, let's see if someplace hires me overseas. And it was this like teaching English in Korea.
Was it like VIP kid or something like that?
It was a Workaway.
Workaway, okay.
And and so it's not to children. It's not to children. It's like college students, people my age. I would be working in a cafe and all that. And so I told my friend Skylar, who's also learning Korean, we had a call last night. We're checking out visas. You don't need a visa. We're like, okay, this is great. This is awesome. We look at the frickin' COVID restrictions, and it's like, you have to quarantine for 2 weeks. Okay, fine. No, you have to do it in one of their government facilities. They have 8. They have 8 government facilities, which Australia also has too, because I've had a couple friends go back home to Australia. But the view from that hotel, I'm like, this is lovely. Okay. I look up the Korean ones. It is also, you have to pay for it. I didn't know that. But that makes sense.
That's how Americans go missing.
It's up to $2,000. $2,000 to be like, you're paying to basically be in
you got to pay to play,
because then they show you the food that you eat. I was like, oh, I can't. You can only go to your door to pick up the food. There are speakers in your room, and they'll say, your breakfast is here. Then you can go to your door. You get 1 water with every meal.
Sounds like something like an Eli Roth movie, like Hostel or something. It's like, you know, is that movie Turistas, and where you go and you end up in like the Oregon, the black market, Oregon.
I'm gonna die here.
That's exactly how it. That's
I was like,
happen.
okay, I'm not gonna pay $2,000 to be in jail. But good on the Korean government, because they're like, we don't want y'all here.
They
we're gonna make it really hard.
They attacked the whole like COVID situation right at the front, right at the beginning of it. They attacked it, and that's what they're doing. But I believe right now, after hearing this, somewhere some writer has just sold this exact script to Blumhouse, and that's going to be one of their newest scary movies coming out, where it's going to be young Americans. They're going to go and teach in a foreign country.
Stays at the Ramada Inn in South Korea.
It's going to be like, oh, are you here? You're going to meet at the airport. It's like, oh, hey, I see your little pamphlet. Are you going to go teach for like English now? Oh, yeah, me too. Oh, what flight? Oh, yeah, you're on the same flight and everything's fine. It's like, oh, we're going to go to a party. And the next thing you know, they wake up. It's just like the lights, it's all blurry. The lens is blurry. They wake up. They're like, where are we? Help. Get me out of here. And then that's just like, you're going to be and you're going to have tape.
You are now underground.
And you're going to have to fight your way out. Be careful. You got to take care of yourself. People are desperate these days. No one works.
I can't go. I'm like,
no.
Desperate. I'm just trying to teach English, okay?
Yeah, and now you're going to end up in like a horror movie, a real life horror movie. And it's going to be a conspiracy theory.
But I'll be booked.
You'll be booked and blessed, and you're gonna be sent in like a cupboard from Wayfair
We
to
booked and
somebody.
blessed and dead.
Yeah, and it's gonna be like associated through Wayfair, like one of those cabinets. Did you hear about that?
Yeah. Oh my God.
That's amazing.
Is
I love
that
it.
real?
That's okay.
What the
Aside,
heck?
okay, we talked about the Black Lives Matter. We talked about intimacy coaches,
Right.
and Me Too. We've talked about COVID,
Talk about these cabinets.
but let's talk about conspiracy theories during this whole pandemic. It went off. The whole cabinet thing. Like,
People were bored.
yeah, and like we have a couple of ottomans from Wayfair, and there was no kids in there, and I don't think any kids were hurt in the making of those.
But like, is it real? Like, it was like a thing that sort of blew up just a little bit, and I saw people posting about it, and now I haven't heard anything since, and I'm like, okay, but are these kids? What's going on?
Yeah,
is this real?
We don't know. Child trafficking is really huge, and we know it's really huge, like in our industry. You know what I mean? And like in government, but it's kind of like, I think the combination of everything in the news that was happening with the riots, with protests, with police shootings, with COVID deaths, with COVID, with not working.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like we need to distract ourselves. Like, oh, let's create, this whole thing. It's kind of like Slender Man. And, those little girls thought Slender Man was real, and it was just a character created for like a Photoshop competition. And, it got out of hand. She lived. They stabbed her a ton of times, but I think she lived.
Oh, really? But they stabbed her a lot of times.
A ton of times. Yeah. And the most craziest thing is if you watch their confessions or like the interrogations, these girls.
I watched the tape.
It's nuts. Blank faces.
They were so far gone. They were like, Slender Man made me do it. Like straight deadpan. Yeah.
It's nuts. That's spooky. Yeah.
Spooky.
It's spooky stuff.
For sure.
And the conspiracies. And on top of all those conspiracies, in the middle of this whole pandemic, and there's the protests, the Pentagon decides to release the photos or the video of the alien footage, the UFO as well, during this whole thing.
Wait, you broke up a little bit.
Oh, I'm sorry.
What?
So during this whole time, right after the protests, and there was a little bit of rioting, and COVID deaths were spiking, going crazy. The Pentagon decided to finally release video footage of UFO coming into contact with our aircraft.
I saw that.
Yeah. And it's kind of like,
and the UFOs, murder hornets. I miss the days in the 2000s when there were clowns killing people in the forest.
Yes.
Take me back to that. Take me back.
We might go right back to that next month.
I know, right? There might be some
careful what you wish for. Yeah.
Honestly, it's just like, that was the scariest thing. I think that I was like, oh my gosh, the world is a dumpster fire. Like, there are killer clowns and like all this stuff. And now if only I could go back to simpler times.
Yeah. It's nuts.
Here we are. UFOs.
On that note, thank you for talking to me. Stay on after I hit stop. Rosa wants to say hello. Off.
Yes, of course.
But for everyone listening out there, can we find you on social media?
I'm on Instagram as Ash Della Rosa, on Twitter as well. I'm on Facebook. I have a website, ashleydellarosa.com.
ashleydellarosa.com. Perfect. That's awesome. And you can find me at Jorge's Isolation Podcast. And that's on Instagram, and on YouTube. It's under Jorge Chapa. You can see my pretty face there. Thank you once again, Ashley. This has been amazing chatting with someone other than my 1-year-old and watching Coco Melon and Super Simple Songs.
Oh, gosh.
So yeah, that's been on repeat nonstop. So
I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Stay on the air once we hit stop here. And everybody, thank you for listening. Don't forget to hit subscribe, share it with your friends, and leave a nice review, please. That helps a lot. All right. Take care, everybody. Bye.
Bye.